Hey Earthers, Nikki here, and today we're going to keep on exploring the Expanse, but we're going to back up a little bit in the chronology. So I'll be giving you mostly non-spoiler reviews today of the 3 Expanse prequels. So that includes Drive, The Churn, and The Butcher of Anderson Station. So stay tuned. Let's begin with Drive. Drive was published in 2012, and I'll be going through these short stories and novellas in chronological order. Okay, so like in the Expanse chronological order. And for Drive, we get the story of Solomon Epstein. And maybe the name Epstein is ringing a bell for you because you think, ooh, the Epstein Drive, which is super important to the series. So yes, Solomon Epstein was a Martian, and he was the inventor of the Epstein Drive. So this takes place quite a bit before Leviathan wakes. And he's the inventor of this engine, which made it possible to travel to the outer reaches of our solar system. And as James S.A. Corey has said in interviews, when they're asked how the Epstein Drive works, they say, oh, it works very well, efficiently. And that's it, okay? So it's the science is kept secret, all right, here. And we meet Solomon Epstein in present tense, okay? So we get his POV in present tense, and he's driving his refurbished yacht with his tweaked engine, and this is going to be the famous Epstein engine. And the ship just keeps accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. So the G's are going up and up and up. And so he's like getting to this point where he can like hardly move his body. And we start to get some flashbacks of his written in past tense. So we get the story of the night he met his wife and their past. We also learn that Epstein is technically an engine engineer, which is kind of a funny term. And we also get the sense of what the political climate between Earth and Mars is like at this time. And the thing is, like, distance is realistically measured in travel time. And at this point, it takes like 4 months to travel from Earth to Mars and vice versa. So like politically speaking, this is kind of similar to the distance between the American colonists and England back in the 15th to 19th centuries before we had airplanes. So Earth wants to control Mars, but they're a little bit too far away, technically speaking, to do so. So things are quite tense. They're always on the brink of war with each other, but they're not quite there. See, Mars has the better technology, but Earth has more ships, more people, more resources, more power. So if a war were to break out, Earth would win. And this short story is absolutely fantastic. James S.A. Corey, they do a phenomenal job fleshing Epstein out and making you really feel for him. And so even if you haven't read any of the Expanse books, if you have a spare hour and you want to feel things and you want an excellent story, seriously, check out this short story. It's really, really worth it. Okay, The Churn is the only novella in this mix, so it's like twice as long as the other two. This was published in 2014. And in the Expanse books, there are so many redheads, and I found another redhead in The Churn. And that would be actually Amos from the Roasty Crew, but he's like bald by the time we meet him. And so in this novella, we get the backstory of how Amos Burton became Amos Burton. So like if you've read any of the Expanse books or you've seen the show, you know that he is quite rough and he definitely has had a past. So we learn a bit about his past in this novella, and it takes place in Baltimore. And the character we know as Amos is Timmy at this time. Okay, so we get Timmy in this novella, and we meet Timmy when he is 15 years old. And by the time we meet him as Amos Burton on the Row-C crew, I think he's in his like late 30s or early 40s. And so at the age of 15, he's already large and broad-shouldered with a genial face but vacant eyes, and that's important, and a receding reddish brown hairline. So here's our other redhead. One thing that I absolutely love about the short stories is that James S.A. Corey experiment with different literary devices. So none of the short stories or the novellas are written in the same style. And it took me a little bit to figure out what the POV in the Churn was, because it was so unusual. And so basically, you get to see Timmy through everyone else's eyes. So you get all these other characters' perspectives, but we're kind of mostly focused on Timmy. And then at the very end, we get Timmy's perspective finally. So it's weird. It's like a limited, omniscient, it's a strange narration style, but it works really well here. And so at this time, and at the time in the Expanse series in general, the UN, so Earth, is not a great place to live. Well, Earth is overpopulated. Okay, that's not a huge surprise. And there's not enough jobs, so most people are enrolled in basic. So with basic, you don't have to work. You get like access to certain things. You get access to the buses. You get kind of just this general low-level health care. You live in a small, crappy apartment. You get recycled clothing, that kind of thing. However, in the Churn, we meet another class of people entirely. So there's like that small select class of people who get to make something of themselves, and that's not the vast majority of the population. But there's also an underbelly here, and we meet the underbelly in the Churn. And the underbelly are those that were never registered, or they adopted some new identities to escape the system. Okay, so that's the world we're introduced to. And Amos Burton in this novella, the Amos Burton we meet, is not the same Amos Burton we get as one of the Rocinante crew members. Okay, so Amos Burton, or Mr. Burton, in this novella is neat. He's well manicured. He's this intelligent man who's described as just being the product of a broken system with too few opportunities. So he's someone who, if he had the opportunities, he would have been successful in like a less sketchy way, basically. So he's one of the overlords of the Baltimore underworld, okay? And in the novella, it's referred to as, he works in criminal enterprises. That's the nice way of putting it. So he deals in like prostitutes and drugs and arms and falsified identities, you know, all that kind of stuff. Timmy was born to one of Burton's prostitutes and was never registered. And this doesn't mean that Burton is Timmy's father or anything. It's just, you know, he's he runs the organization. Timmy's mother died tragically young, and you can imagine kind of how. And he was raised then by this woman named Lydia. And Lydia is another prostitute, or actually, she was kind of more of a concubine, maybe, I would think. That's kind of a better way of putting her. And Lydia's messed up. They're all kind of psychologically messed up. Timmy's definitely psychologically messed up. Timmy's like, it's so strange. Like, his conscience is external. Like, he kind of leans on others to figure out what's right and just kind of goes with things. Like, he doesn't trust himself to like figure out on his own right from wrong, which is super strange. So, like, he's really detached. But he was raised by Lydia, and I actually really liked Lydia's character. She reminded me of like a washed up, like golden age Hollywood actress like Norma Desmond from Sunset Boulevard, or like an aging starlet or groupie, or like this is one of my favorite albums ever, Loaded, Velvet Underground. So like if you've ever heard the song by Lou Reed, New Age, okay, Over the Hill and Looking for Love, like that's her for sure. Or like her POV was also kind of like something out of Humans of New York. I love Humans of New York, so I really liked her character, but she was messed up, and she had one like major ick factor flaw, which just is like, oh, that's really bad. It's so bad. But you're going to have to read the novella to figure out what that is on your own, because I don't want to reveal it here. And I just want to give you one Lydia quote, okay? Her face was like a mask. The makeup applied so perfectly, it shoved her back into the uncanny valley. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I recently read and reviewed Alternate Routes by Tim Powers, and the Uncanny Valley came up in Alternate Routes, but I had just assumed that the Uncanny Valley had something to do with the valley, like San Fernando Valley in California. But no, it's actually a concept, okay, that was identified in 1970s by a robotics professor, Masahiro Mori. And what the Uncanny Valley is it says that as humanoid objects start to resemble human beings more and more and more, but they are not quite human beings, it gives us this like eerie, uncomfortable, or revolting feeling. So that dip, okay, is the Uncanny Valley. So I just thought I'd share that with you. Like I didn't know that was a concept. So kind of cool. Timmy then gets pulled into Mr. Burton's employ by his childhood friend, Eric. And Eric is very talented at falsifying identities. So that's what he does for Mr. Burton. And Eric has this like underdeveloped arm. Like, so he has like the arm of like a 6-year-old and also a limp because he was beaten as a child. So these people have like these really harsh and tragic lives. So they are like always constantly swimming against the current here. And every several years or so, the police, who are Star Helix, you might remember Star Helix because Miller worked for Star Helix on series. So Star Helix starts like digging up those with falsified identities, like maybe every like decade or so. And so then they go around and they eliminate the crime lords. And so then what happens is like, so new people rise to become the crime lords until the Star Helix comes around and churns everything back up again. So that is the churn. Okay. So the churn is occurring in this novella. Okay. So where Star Helix is going around trying to take down those who are making their living illegally. Anyway, and so this was also a really great read. I've been enjoying these novellas and short stories just so much. And the violence in this. The violence in the climax, oh my gosh. It would have been just like perfect for Quentin Tarantino to direct it. I just want to give you one little hint that I hope I don't get in trouble for. Okay, so the churn is the story of how Timmy becomes Amos. All right, finally, we have The Butcher of Anderson Station, which was published in 2011. And this is a short story about Colonel Fred Johnson. So remember, he was an earther, okay? And he became known as the Butcher of Anderson Station. By the time we meet him in The Expanse, he's already known as the Butcher of Anderson Station. And really, this is the story of how Fred was recruited for the OPA by Anderson Dawes. And so we start out with Fred drinking in a bar on Series, and he's making fun of the funky mushroom tasting whiskey. So he's really ticking the bartender off, and he's like, I'm willing to pay for the real stuff here. And he's thinking about like how different the Belters are from them. He's thinking back to his childhood on Earth about this time where he saw this plant that was starved of sunlight and nutrients. The plant was too tall, too pale, and that's how the Belters looked to Fred. And I really like that comparison there. And so he's at this bar, and the next thing you know, there's a sack drawn over his head, and he's dragged to a room where Dawes is waiting for him. And this is the first time that Anderson Dawes and Fred Johnson have met each other, and Dawes grills him on what happened to Fred, what happened to him during the Anderson Station catastrophe like 3 years earlier. So before I get into that a little bit more, I just want to give you one Dawes quote that gives you a better sense of the Belters' mentality. When I was growing up, my dad used to beat the crap out of me if I spat someplace other than the reclamation duct because we needed the water. We don't waste things out here, Colonel. We can't afford to. You understand that, though, don't you? Okay, so Fred was a Marine for the UN, and he served as the Overwatch officer for Anderson Station. So he ordered the UN Marines into action on Anderson Station because of the intel that was given to him. And that assault resulted in the death of 173 armed insurgents and more than 1,000 civilians. And this earned Fred the UN Medal of Freedom. And he is very conflicted over what happened. So we get to learn exactly what did happen there. And we get a better sense then through the short story of Fred's character. And I'm 4 books in to the series now, and we haven't unfortunately gotten a lot of Fred Johnson's character yet. In the TV series, I absolutely loved his character, and so it'd be really great if we had a little bit more of him in the book. So I'm hoping for his POV in the main storyline soon. I don't know if it's going to come, but if it does, I think this short story would definitely enrich that experience. All right, that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and please remember to subscribe to iWizard and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time for my review of Nemesis games, which I'm really excited for. So, bye!